Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar Renewables in National Energy and Climate Plans of Visegrad countries, challenging the low ambition. We have a diverse group of attendees. We cannot see each other, but we are here, hopefully. We have almost 100 participants, very diverse group, officials from European Commission, EU member states, journalists, renewable energy industry practitioners. My name is Jan Doležal. I work for Czech Biomass Association and Czech Renewable Energy Chamber, and I'm coordinating this event. This webinar will cover the ambition of Visegrad countries in increasing the share of renewables in the next decade. In a moment, you will hear from representatives of renewable energy associations from Czechia, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and Austria, who will present their analyses of the final national energy and climate plans, NECPs. We might hear this abbreviation a lot today. My colleagues will evaluate the gap between the plans and the renewable energy potential and present recommendations for increasing the share of renewables in these countries. The event is organized by the platform Visegrad Plus for renewable energy. It is supported by the European Commission as a part of the Renewables Networking Platform project, which is coordinated by U4S, the European Forum for Renewable Energy Sources, and European Renewable Energy Federation. Visegrad Plus for Renewable Energy platform of renewable energy associations from Visegrad Group countries and Austria has been established in Prague last May to gather representatives of the renewable industries and challenge the weak progress of energy transition in our region. I hope you can hear me. Few practicalities at the beginning. In this Zoom webinar, you as attendees can ask written questions using the Q&A button. It is at the right bottom of the interface of the Zoom application. So please use this Q&A button to ask questions to the panelists, and you will be also able to upvote questions which were written by others. We have a dense lineup of panelists. Therefore, we will hold a Q&A session at the end of our webinar after all presentations. Only if we are disciplined and our panelists will stick to the plan. We will take one question after each presentation. My colleagues are also more than happy to discuss with you details which might not be covered during a short presentation. I already shared with those who were registered by yesterday a few materials. I will again share a press release with contact details on our panelists and the presentations in PDF, and also analyses we prepared in an email after the event in 1 hour. And now I would like to give the microphone to Martin Bursík, who is a senior policy advisor in Czech Renewable Energy Chamber, who will set the floor for our today's webinar and the relevance of the cooperation in the Visegrad region on increasing the share of renewables. Martin, I see you are unmuted. The microphone is yours.
All right. Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me floor, and thank you for the opportunity to enter this webinar. Let me start with some brief remembering about Visegrad, because we've been using the term of Visegrad naturally, but maybe some of us have not experienced it personally, some of us have forgotten. The Visegrad cooperation of the Central and Eastern European countries was established in February 1991. By the way, 10 days before the end of the Warsaw Pact. That time, the dynamic of a political development was extreme. And interesting is that the text was in fact formulated by our at that time President Václav Havel, and it was signed by Václav Havel, Lech Wałęsa, so two prominent dissidents and at that time presidents, as well as Josef Antal, who was a leader of a Hungarian Democratic Forum, being a main personality on the round tables with the communist regime. And the main task of Visegrad was to guide the Central and Eastern European countries so that they return to the Western civilization circuit by joining NATO and by entering, becoming members of the European Union. And Czechoslovakia, Hungary and Poland have transformed from the totalitarian regimes into liberal democracies rather quickly and effectively. And the original idea of Visegrad was fulfilled. And now we're getting to the point where normally when we're using our iPhones or some other electronic devices, we regularly update. And we are used to updating, but no upgrade, no update has been developed for Visegrad and nor installed. And I wonder that the main reason of continuing of a cooperation of Visegrad was in fact the simple arithmetics, which says 4 together is more than 1 4 times. And so the country started to cooperate on the European level, but the idea or even vision has gone. And to be very frank, the Visegrad countries became gradually known as the troublemakers, especially in the field of environment and climate change. And I know what I'm talking about because during the last presidency of the European Council by the Czech Republic, I was Minister for the Environment. So I was responsible for coordinating that time 27 ministers in the field of environment and climate change. And I know that how hard it was with the partners from Visegrad, so I personally experienced this kind of cooperation. And because of this, we decided about a year ago on the meeting of European Renewable Energy Federation in Brussels that we will launch the new initiative which we called Visegrad Plus, with the aim to help the qualitative shift from coal to renewables. And that time we symbolically shouted, well-known Visegrad is dead, long live Visegrad. And we defined 6 priorities and areas of the cooperation. First is to build a strong regional coalition based on this platform. And we invited Austria because of having a robust experience with launching renewables bottom up, and so that they share the experience. Second priority was, or areas of cooperation was, or is to exchange experiences and best practices with the decentralized renewable energy system. The third priority is to cooperate in designing energy policies, which will be based on a vast potential of renewables. Fourth is to advise politicians, institutions, and media. Fifth priority is to actively work on gradual phasing out of nuclear power from Visegrad countries, or Visegrad region. And sixth is to reduce the dependence on fossil fuels imports and actively promote European goals in the field of energy and climate. And since we launched the Visegrad Plus initiative about a year ago, the European Union, respectively European Commission, European Parliament, European Council, have moved significantly forward by completing the clean energy package, adopting the new Green Deal, and finally delivering the new Generation Europe recovery package less than 2 weeks ago. And due to this progressive policies and setting up and announcing more ambitious targets, and due to new robust support programs, and also due to understanding of the role of renewables, Visegrad countries are no longer a unified bloc opposing renewable energy and climate policy. This is one of the main conclusions of our analysis and of our cooperation, that this once unity is falling apart, which from our point of view is a very good news for all European citizens. We know that CE countries are having a huge potential of renewable development, and that sooner or later, the countries will join the mainstream. Our goal is so that it happens as soon as possible. And if I may briefly add something with respect to the program of today, renewable energy experts, which are representing Visegrad countries and Austria, will present their independent analysis of the national energy and climate plans. And we have found several similarities or similar developments within the countries. Let me mention at least 4 of them. Renewable energy share in these Visegrad countries has been declining or stagnating since around 2014, compared to all the rest of the European member states. Second point is that none of the Visegrad countries delivered the renewable energy 2030 target, which is in line with fair burden sharing as what the Commission has been asking the member states. So if we look state by state, Czech Republic delivered first 20.8, later on 22%. However, Commission has been asking for 23. Hungary delivered 21, Commission's asking for 23. Poland delivered 21 to 23, Commission has been asking for 25. Slovakia delivered 19.2, Commission has been asking for 24. It's just Austria, which delivered 46 to 50% share of renewable energy on gross domestic consumption of energy, and Commission has been asking 46. So now we see where we are. Another third common point is that all Visegrad countries strongly underestimate the role of renewable electricity production. And we wonder that the main motivation of this underestimation is in fact still dreaming about the role of nuclear, and that the governments are keeping some space reserved for nuclear installations, though we know that this has got at least a problem with the timing, not talking about economy of nuclear compared with the economy of wind and solar. And fourth common similar point is that all countries overestimate the role of biomass heat, and we are struggling with the sustainability criteria. We are wondering about the development. And as a conclusion, and let me finish with this, we experience that the joint work of experts and the cooperation and transfer of experiences in the field of renewable energy development makes sense. Secondly, we believe that the analysis could be of a use for the Commission, so that the Commission develops a more sharp picture about the situation in the Visegrad countries. Third, we hope that the analysis will help with the negotiations which continue next Monday at the Ministerial Council, Energy Ministers Council video conference meeting. And last but not least, we would like to thank the European Commission, especially DG Energy, Michaela Hall and Radoš Horáček, as well as Dirk Hendricks from European Renewable Energy Federation, for providing us the opportunity so that we shifted our cooperation into a concrete form under this project. So thank you, mentioned, and thank you all for your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin, for explaining the motivations and goals of our cooperation and summarizing the main results from our work so far. I would now like to dive into the details of the national energy and climate plans in Visegrad countries. And I would like to welcome Irena Gajewska, who is working for Polish Wind Energy Association, to share her screen. and share her results.
Yes, thank you, Jan. So now I'm struggling with with sharing the screen, but I'll manage this. So the first success. So thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Irena Gajewska, and I represent the Polish Wind Energy Association. So today I'm here to give you the PWIA assessment of the Polish NECP, and also to show you that there are alternative paths, and PWIA has developed one. So let's come to the, let's say, main conclusions. So PWIA estimates that Poland can actually go through the energy transition faster and cheaper than it is stated in the National Energy and Climate Plan. The second conclusion is that we can actually avoid developing the nuclear project post 2030, which is envisaged by the government. Instead, we should actually use more the potential for onshore and offshore wind development and use the gas-fired capacity to balance it. And this path will allow us to meet the more ambitious targets than the Polish NECP proposes. So at least 25% in gross renewable energy consumption rather than 21, 23 as the government, Polish government says. And for this to be possible, we should have like the 35% of renewable electricity in the mix, and this level would allow us to actually meet the overall goal on all the three sectors. And the last conclusion is that the industry in Poland could be one of the key drivers of the energy transition. So let's go to the details. So here you can see the comparison of the NECP and the PWIA scenario in terms of the installed capacity. So the main differences are there is no nuclear project in the PWIA scenario. As I mentioned before, instead we have more onshore and offshore wind. And what else to actually to maybe anticipate some of your questions? We have less PV than the government plans. Why? Probably it's about the money. Actually, as of today, onshore wind is still much cheaper than PV. It's like 20 when taking into account the last auction results, like 20 euro per megawatt hour, which is still a big difference. So here you can see the mix by the generation, and again here the comparison of the scenarios in columns, which actually shows that let's say the greater ambition in going in, let's say, leading in phasing out coal and deploying renewables in the PWIA plan. So our recommendation is that we actually go for at least 10 gigawatts of offshore wind till 2040, which was planned by the government initially in the draft NECP, but later on revised actually down. So now the NECP says 8 gigawatts by 2040. And also more onshore wind would help us, let's say, fill the gap after the coal is phased out. So on this graph, you see that this actually the level of the level of 35% in gross electricity use, which can be acquired with the PWIA scenario, would allow us to meet the EU target for 2030 in all sectors, so heating, cooling, and transport. When talking about energy transition in Poland, it's very often said we cannot afford it. It was an argument raised very often. So, so based on our calculations, we can see that if we actually use the potential of renewables that we have, and Poland is quite a country with vast land and seashore, let's say, potential for development of onshore and offshore, respectively. So when we take advantage of this, as I gave the numbers earlier, we can actually go the faster and cheaper way towards decarbonization. And especially when you look at the graph, you see that after 2034, the, let's say, gap, the difference between the NECP scenario and the PUA scenario is very, very, very wide. Since we, in the PUA proposed path, we rely on cheaper sources like onshore, while the government wants to go for the nuclear project. So to give you some numbers, at 2040, the cost of electricity, the difference, so the electricity in the PUA scenario is, let's say, cheaper for the Polish budget at the volume of 8 billion per year. So the similar trend is seen with the CO2 emissions. So right now in Poland, we are at this, say, stagnation point in terms of CO2 reduction, emission reduction. And we could actually do something to change this trend. And with the solution that we propose with the PUA scenario, we can actually go quite fast to the reduction of CO2 emissions. And if you compare the numbers, you can see that while now the level of emission in the Polish energy mix per megawatt hour is quite high, so between 675 kilograms per megawatt hour, let's say, so to 718. So in 2040, we can significantly reduce this level with especially with the PUA mix, while already in 2030 the level is also significantly lower than as of today. So, and here some pictures to give you the idea of the emissions. So for as of today, the gas block at Stalowa Wola emits 360 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour. Quite recently, the government, the PGE actually changed the plans regarding the Ostrołęka conventional power plant. It was planned to be hard coal. It's going to be gas. When planned for hard coal, the emission would be 730 kilograms. With the PUA mix in 2040, the emission in the Polish mix per 1 megawatt hour will be less than 300 kilograms. And one more picture to show you, to visualize the changes. So in 2040, we will, with the PUA scenario, we will emit 53 million tons of CO2 per year, while as of today, the greatest, the biggest emittent, CO2 emittent, the biggest poisoner in Europe, the Bełchatów power plant, emits almost 40 million tons of CO2 per year. And here, like I would say, a new new component of our our analysis that actually visualized and materialized during the last year. We see great interest of the Polish industry in renewables. The industry in Poland consumes 1/3 of the whole domestic energy consumption. So it's around 60 terawatt hours per year. And out of this, half of the consumption goes to the energy intensives. So the Polish Wind Energy Association has been working with the energy intensives on paving the way towards corporate PPAs, because we see a great potential in the industry for decarbonization and deployment of renewables. So with the energy consumption of 30 terawatt hours per year, and the energy intensives declarations that actually they could balance within their own internal grids up to 20% of renewables, 20% of their mix. We estimated that within the next decade, it could bring almost 3.5 gigawatts of new renewable capacity. 1.4 gigawatt in onshore wind and 1.8 gigawatt in PV. And this is a 20% increase it would mean a 20% increase in renewable energy production for 2030 in comparison with the NECP. And it would also mean that Poland would avoid extra 6,000 tons a year in CO2 emissions. So these are very promising numbers, and the interest in renewables in the industry is genuine, and let's say backed up by very serious reasons, because the hard coal-based energy mix means a huge increase in energy prices for industry, which is of course a threat to their competitiveness. And also the high carbon footprint is not good for the goods in terms of sales opportunities. So the industry sees that they actually have to go for the renewables, and they are ready and willing to cooperate on this. So we are, I think, on good track. And just to give you even more optimism when it comes to Polish NECP, I would like to quote the statement of Ms. Monika Morawiecka. She's currently running the PGE Baltica offshore wind project, but before she was a long-standing strategic development director at the PGE Group, and the PGE is our largest Polish energy concern. And last week she said, over the years, we repeated to ourselves that, and to the world, that we cannot afford to develop renewables. Now we can say we cannot afford not to invest in renewables. And I can see that this notion is getting more and more understanding among the Polish decision makers. And I think it gives hope for change towards, let's say, less carbon dependent Poland. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions.
Irena, thank you very much for your presentation. We have one question in our chat, but I would save it for later, because it's relevant also for other panelists. I would just remind you that you can ask written questions using the Q&A button. It's located at the bottom of the Zoom application. It's the second button from the right, Q&A. So please ask your questions there. Also, we will share with you PDF versions of the slides our panelists will have today right after the event. So you don't need to take notes and so on. Now I would like to give floor to Jan Karaba, Director of Slovak Association of Photovoltaic and Renewable Energy Industry, to share his presentation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jan Karaba. I'm the Director of Slovak Association of PV Industry and Renewables, and I will be presenting the results of our analysis of the NECP as it was submitted to the European Commission. We titled the presentation "Renewable Energy as a Measure of Last Resort" because this is what we think best represents the total idea of what the government really was trying to convey by this NECP. I would like to firstly go over some key points of the NECP, just so that there is an overview of something that is like the foundation of the material. And this is what the Slovakia, the plan for decarbonization was supposed to be all about. We know that the nuclear energy is supposed to be the core of low emission energy mix. The renewable energy really is as the measure of last resort, or to only complement nuclear energy, and only in the PV and wind, really. These were the selected areas where the government wanted to do some development. In the heating and cooling sector, it's supposed to be relying on district heating systems with increasing share of biomass. And in the transport sector, the government wants to base the development only on battery-based electrical mobility and the biomethane, but only up to the level of necessary minimum ambition of 14%. Our analysis, on the other hand, was performed based on the real existing status of Slovak energy sector, on the actual trends in energy consumption and the development that is currently taking place in Slovakia, and the technical and economic potential of renewables in all sectors based on global development trends rather than local. And we also wanted to, of course, achieve a higher level of ambition, because this was the intended purpose of NECP. Globally speaking, this is the comparison of the NECP main targets as it was presented in the material. And we see that Slovakia wants to achieve a total RES share of 19.2%, and in transport 14%. In the global emissions, we want to stick to 40% reduction, and 43% in ETS sectors and so on. We focused on the total area share and the transport, because this is where we found is something that really wants to or needs to be analyzed. Our proposal, as you can see, is to increase from 19.2% to 25%, but it needs to be said right from the very beginning that we found some flaw in the calculation of area share based on the very numbers presented by the government, because And when we recalculated the area share, we found that the total share should rather be 20.8% and not 19.2%. This will be explained further on. This forecast, this is actually a kind of a very big obstacle that we forecast, or that we presented, is that there is no forecast of gross final energy consumption explicitly included in the material. And when we really went from the point of reverse calculation, we also revealed that the baseline and the trajectory of the final energy consumption is not really based on the correct numbers, especially in the sector of electricity and heating and cooling, because these numbers are not matching what was reported to Eurostat and also the national data for 2019. So that's something that really needs to be corrected. In the coming to really the details of different sectors, in the electricity consumption, we perceive that there is a strong technical and economic potential, especially of wind and solar energy, mainly in the photovoltaics. And these potentials are substantially underrated by the government. There is a lot more potential, especially with the decreasing cost of these technologies and the increasing cost effectiveness compared to traditional or conventional sources of energy. On the other hand, biomass and biogas is standing on an incorrect baseline. For 2021, there is no way we will be able to achieve what the governments envision. And also, there is no adjustment for the sustainability after the feed-in tariff cutoff support. Because that's a major, of course, economic factor for the sustainability of these existing biomass or biogas plants. The new biomass and biogas will, of course, face the sustainability criteria as they are included in the recasted Renewable Energy Directive. And last but not least, the NECP doesn't explain why and how the proposed trajectory should be achieved. So there's only the numbers, but really no plan how to achieve the numbers, even when the increase is taken into account. We say, you see in the graph that the targets are increased by our proposal, and in the biomass they are rather decreased, really, because we see that it will not be so easy to develop new biomass or biogas and to sustain the existing ones. In the heating and cooling sector, we perceive that the heat pumps, which is really like one of the major growing technology sectors in the whole world. This is underrated by the government. It's not even matching the global growth, and there is no plan or no focus on the development and the support of this technology. This is why we are proposing to increase the share. Also, the potential of integration of the different or new renewables in this sector is limited, because Slovakia is very highly gasified already. The level of gasification is over 90%. And there, of course, we have to comply with sustainable criteria for biomass. And we know that Slovakia is already facing some concerns about this criteria. Contrary, to the above, the NECP places too much focus on the district heating systems. They must be preserved at all costs, according to the government. which is fine, but it will be very hard to increase the share of other renewables when we only take into account the district heating systems. In the transport, this is perhaps the one of the most important or most interesting sectors for decarbonization. We see that the government really only made a poor job in taking the opportunity to really utilize this potential of decarbonization here. They only are trying to achieve the very least as it is prescribed by European Union. On the other hand, we see that there are substantial opportunities, especially in combination with the multiplication effects of battery-based and hydrogen-based electrical mobility, when the electricity is, or the fuel is coming from renewable energy sources. We know that for road transport, this should be, the multiplication effect should be 4 times and of 1.5 times for rails. This technological potential of hydrogen and battery base is really not envisioned. And we propose that we should really focus on this at a pace higher than global growth, compounded growth of this sector. The government sees some potential in the biomethane, but it really won't do much difference for decarbonization, really. So this is something that we kept, and the proposal is really not to focus on this sector too much. This is the global or the overall picture of the contributions. We see that in the baseline, we adjusted the baselines according to the real data by Eurostat and the national data that we already have for, especially for electricity and the heating and cooling. We propose that we increase ambitions in all sectors, and you can see very clearly that the biggest step forward should be made in the sector of transport. And these opportunities shouldn't be missed out, because there are clear incentives also proposed and given in the Renewable Energy Directive. As stated in percentages, when we recalculated the NECP target, it should be 20.8% instead of 19.2%. We also this is the trajectory that is leading up to this 20.8%, and we propose that this total contribution of renewables should be increased to 25.6, also based on a different trajectory in all sectors. This is also, this kind of percentage would exceed the European Commission's recommendation, which was 24%. As per concrete policy-making recommendations, we formulated 5, and you can read them. Really, we want to focus on more realistic forecast of the final energy, because this is what's leading also to different percentages. This forecast is really missing in the document. We want to set also more ambitious targets, taking into account technical economic potential, especially in wind, PV, electrical mobility, and heat pumps. We want to evaluate the planned measures based on cost effectiveness. This is what also the government wants to do, but it didn't go that far, and it didn't really do it in the material. It is really missing. Also, smart grid development, it is present in the material, but there is not so much focus on it because it also makes adds into the whole picture, and the integration of energy storage is totally missing. So we really want to make the renewable energy sources not a measure of last resort, but really a cornerstone of future energy supply. These are just because we don't just want to be critical about the government's support or effort. There are some success stories that we can name, and these are success stories that we should really build upon. One of them is the self-consumption scheme, which was actually proposed by our association. It's called Local Source. This is what broke the stop status for grid connection finally, but only partially, because it is still there, but it's based on different criteria. And the second success story is a EU program, Green for Households. And that's something that's maybe you are well aware of. So that's for me everything, and please feel free to contact me or to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, for your presentation. We will do a really quick question to you. Very briefly, what is the social acceptance of renewables? Are Slovak customers willing to pay more for renewables, for energy, if it comes from renewables?
It has changed, but you know, the problem is that the old government was really not doing a good job in promoting renewables. So they treat it as the costly solutions that are not, in comparison to nuclear energy, are not giving us the results. We hope that the new government is going to take this more seriously. They are more oriented towards decarbonization and green energy. So we are hoping that this will change substantially.
Great. Let us hope that renewable energy will not be a measure of last resort anymore in Slovakia as well as in other countries. Thank you once again, Jan. And now, please, Bela Munkaci, sustainable energy expert from Energiaklub, will present his analysis.
Yes, thank you very much, Jan, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. However, my highlight will be on Hungary, but in my first sentences, I would like to focus on something else, namely on another country, Denmark. Do you know their renewable energy target ratio for the electricity sector? Just because I was really shocked when I realized that it is 109% for 2030. This is what we need to call an ambition to follow and a proper approach. Regarding the Hungarian targets, we are not so ambitious. This 21% renewable energy ratio for the primary energy supply as a goal for 2030 sounds outrageous, comparing to the leader in this field, which is Sweden with 65%. Our backwardness is clearly visible again. As for the unbalanced character of the Hungarian targets, both the heat and electricity production can be mentioned as examples. Regarding the heat, the biomass utilization has a significant dominance with more than 90% ratio within the renewable energy sources. Focusing on electricity, the forecasted solar PV development presents the only significant capacity increase in the plan. It means six-fold growth and around 6,500 megawatt capacity by 2030. This alone may sound promising, but some surprising facts are also need to be highlighted. For example, the wind energy developments, which have been prohibited since 2016 in Hungary, and this regulation may not change by 2030. Moreover, the future of the other crucial technology, the flexible biogas utilization, is not clear, as the NECP doesn't contain information about neither its proposed capacity nor its forecasted production. Regarding the heating and cooling sector, it has already a heavy biomass, namely firewood dominance, with more than 90% ratio. According to the plan, this situation will not change by 2030. Nevertheless, there are two other areas with significant 4-5-fold increase, namely the solar heat and the ambient heat utilization. It is a bit strange that this original diagram here, which focuses on renewable heat technologies, doesn't contain this later energy source, the ambient heat. So therefore, the air source heat pumps and excess heat applications seem completely missing from this diagram. As for the electricity production, the most important future developments and figures are collected in this slide. The 21% ratio is the Hungarian target number for 2030, comparing to this Danish 109%. It seems humiliating, at least for me. The plan has an apparent focus on the centralized nuclear technology. On the one hand, this is a distinctive sign of a governance which centralizes as many aspects of the life as possible. On the other hand, it is a surprising way of development, at least from the light of the very first sentence of this NECP, which highlights on the ultimate importance of energy independence. However, most of the technologies in this nuclear field, as well as the nuclear fuel, need to be imported. The level of our reliance on Russia is very high already, and it will increase according to the plan. One of the biggest steps ahead will be the commissioning of the largest CO2 emitter, which is a 900 megawatt lignite-fired power station. It is planned to be replaced with another centralized power plant, which will use natural gas and household waste, which is not a really good news. These developments should create on a coherent vision, together with smart energy and community energy solutions, but unfortunately the NECP doesn't present these areas in a detailed way and doesn't set serious targets, unfortunately. As regards the renewable sources in the electricity sector, there will be a huge solar PV development, as you can see in this figure. It will be useful in the summer period, but it will be almost useless in winter time. It is not clearly described that how can the energy system provide enough electricity in shorter or longer periods of time without this huge solar capacity in winter or without the wind energy. So to transform the above mentioned main messages into suggestions, it can be stated that a multidisciplinary approach needs to be used in the energy planning processes in the future. It would be important to improve the concept of the national level network of energy engineers. Of course, this idea is better than nothing, but a much wider set of knowledge need to be applied to solve the problems of energy transition. It would be important to create a network of environmental management centers with multidisciplinary teams. And then in the second point, it would be crucial to lift the ban on wind energy developments. At least 2,000 megawatt new wind energy capacity could be applied by 2030. And it would be very important to use this possibility. And then it would be crucial to transform the existing green premium scheme because in this year, this March, with only one exception, all the supported projects were solar PV developments, which is very strange. So a focus on technology neutrality and cost efficiency would be important. And as a final goal, maybe, so it would be crucial to take seriously the support of energy communities, just because the existing regulation is definitely against these kind of communities. So an encouraging legal background would be definitely crucial. And in my last slides, I would like to highlight some of our projects on this field. And I would like to mention some of our geothermal energy developments. The first geothermal power plant was launched some years ago, which was a very big step ahead, I think. And in this NECP, there are some plans to increase this capacity. And I need to mention this project here in Szeged, which is the second largest geothermal-based district heating system will be in Europe. It is under construction right now. So hopefully some years later, I can report about much more results and much more good examples from Hungary. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Bela, for your presentation. I really liked your title, A Nuclear Vision with a Solar Boost. Hungary might not be winning the contest in increasing the share of renewables, but you are certainly winning a contest in catchy titles.
Thanks.
There is one question, or we have two. I will start with the one which is in the chat from earlier, which is, it is maybe related to the ban on wind energy in Hungary. What are your explanations of this ban, and how you see the obstacles for renewable energy developments when the public is opposed to these projects?
As for the reasons, I must admit that I don't really know the reasons. Maybe there are no reasons at all against wind energy in Hungary. There are just political obstacles maybe. And in the background, there is this new nuclear project, because this project will be extremely expensive. And the wind energy is cheaper and cheaper. So if the government would like to centralize the whole energy system, it is a kind of problem if we have a cheap and decentralized solution against the nuclear development.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That would be...
We have Irena who would like to add something.
So since we have, thank you, Jan, since we have quite a similar situation with wind development in Poland since 2016, we have this ban to localize new onshore projects closer than 10 times height of the turbine tip. So it actually blocked the development. So we are in a curious situation because we are, let's say, auctioning new projects, but they are with the building permits from before 2016, but the development of the new projects is actually blocked. We have high hopes to actually get rid of this ban this year. But when it comes to reasons, I think, well, there was, I guess, not enough education on the wind energy. So we are trying to catch up with this right now in Poland. And also maybe in the beginning of the wind development in our countries, when the rules were not so, let's say, clearly set, there were some issues on the developer side, not, let's say, not making every project the way it should be. So it always gives some, I would say, feed to obstruction on the local community side. However, I think that the education and making the local communities aware of the benefits that actually the wind products bring to them, because it's revenues from real estate tax to the local government budget. It's the lease money for the people who lease their land for projects. And usually, and we see it in many projects in Poland, when the developer is actually doing the good job, I mean, with the, let's say, applying the best practices in the relation with the community, the projects work well. So last year, based on the experience of our companies, member companies within WIA, we developed a code of best practices. So to make aware everyone how actually the wind project should be developed well, meaning with the respect for the environment and the needs of the local community. And you know, it's not only the development phase, it's actually the whole life of the product. So it's 15 years at the minimum. It's usually the time of the support system, but you have to, when you are the investor, you have to take into account it's going to last 20 or 25 years. So it's like building a good relation with the local community, and we see that it actually works where the developers did their work well. So we promote this this conduct of behaving for developers, and we see that actually among many local communities there is not only no obstruction nor resistance against wind, but the ones who actually took advantage of the benefits of the wind turbines in their area, especially in the budget, they want the new investment, and they appeal together with us, the Polish Wind Energy Associations, the associations of the renewable local communities, the association of the whole local communities in Poland. They appeal together with us to the government that this ban on wind development is abolished. However, you know, it's always individual case. So there is no like, there are legal rules, but there is also application and, you know, this local case. So I think in terms of communication, the developer has to be wise and act very fairly towards the local community. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Irena. And now I would like to give the microphone to my colleague, Martin Mikeska, who will be presenting the results from the Czech analysis.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. And first, please let me excuse my colleague Štěpán Chalupa, who had to sit in his dentist chair early in the morning. We still don't know the result, but we cross our fingers for him. Then let me start immediately with the first basics. On the first slide, you can see all the numbers we will be talking about that are relevant for Czechia. We compared the 2020 data, which are in blue, with three main sources. One is the Czech NECP, the recent version, which aims to overlay 22%, compared to the European Commission recommendation of 23%. There's the recommendation from June 2019. And the last figures we will be talking about are Czech Renewable Energy Chamber medium scenario that speaks of at least 24.4% of renewables on gross national consumption in 2030. The most controversial for us is obviously the sector of electricity, and from the other hand also of the heating. And I will be speaking in my next slide about details about the figures we got. As usually, the devil is in the detail, because obviously you could say, well, the difference of 2.4 percentage points between 22% and 24.4%, it's so minor that that's maybe even a loss of time to speak about it. The truth is very different. If you have a look, what does it make in the electricity sector, you can see that these 2.4 percentage points reflects in almost double share in the electricity sector in 2030. That's our one of our crucialest point we got. Next, if we have a look on a distribution among the sectors, how the new renewable energy additions between 2021 and 2030 will be distributed among the sectors, we can see two biggest gaps. One is the very big share of renewable heating and cooling, but we speak generally about the heating, the cooling is very minor there. We see that the government expects 2/3 of the new additions happen in the heating sector, while seeing around 1/3 of the development compared to our scenario in the electricity sector. And these two conclusions are our two key critical points. And on my next slide, we will have a look on details about the electricity, which particularly means wind and photovoltaics, and also on the biomass, on the large biomass combustion, which is reflected in the heating. So here we come to the calculations for wind power. You can see that in the country, it's the total installed capacity of 342 megawatts. It's very low. It has nothing to be compared with regions that have similar conditions for the wind energy. The government plans to expand it by adding 600 megawatts in the next 10 years. We calculated with at least 3 times higher volumes of wind turbines. And just to give you the comparison, our medium scenario that expects around 2,300 megawatts of wind turbines in year 2030 would mean that by then we will get to around 2/3 or 70% of total installed capacity of wind turbines in Austria, but today. The point is that Austria is the country that has very similar wind conditions, also population density, and also energy infrastructure. This should give you the overall picture how the governmental ambitions are that low and reflects the comparison with other countries. In my next slide, we've got the same, the breakdown of photovoltaic sectors. You can see that for 2030, we propose more than double volumes than the governmental plans. From other hand, we see from our members, the photovoltaic installation companies, we know that annual additions of 300 or 500 megawatts are fully feasible for the Czech market. And finally, on my third slide, we will see the details about the heating sectors. You see that the government expects that the dominant part of new renewable heat will come from biomass combustion in large district heating. Those are the charts, and the first chart. Our conclusion is that governmental figures seems to be based on today high volumes of biomass being harvested due to the bark beetle calamity, which is the cause of very dry years recently, which means the climate crisis. And this is mostly why we have serious concerns about the sustainability of biomass exploitation in next decade. My next slide, you can see one of our strongest arguments we have and we put in the debate, and those are the calculation of the public support costs necessary for the renewable deployment. And you can see how perfectly it shows how dramatically renewable costs declined. In the light green columns, you can see the cost of the support schemes for existing or producing renewables, which will end around year 2030, compared to the dark green figures, the dark green charts that are the costs of the new renewable installation expected after the 2021. My next slide, you see the breakdown of the costs of the public support schemes for renewables, and those are the annual averages, which is 460 million euros per year. You see that photovoltaics and photovoltaics accumulations make the big part of this. We expect those to be provided mostly by grants, which means not operational support schemes, which is a rather controversial topic in our country. Those calculations are based on our calculations. We can, of course, provide detailed data. We can provide you with open data if you would need it for your own graphic works or your feedbacks. And finally, we get to probably the best part of my story I like best. And this is the overview of investments that will come as a result of the renewable expansion. And here you can see those are the figures prepared by Czech Technical University in Prague, and they made their calculations based on the governmental projections. So you see those are the 13 billion euros are the overall investments. Here you can see the average annual, which is around 1,300 billion. And here we have two messages. And if I want to start with the bad news, not to finish with it, the bad news is that the missed opportunity, and here I speak again with the missed opportunity compared to our medium scenario, it's relatively big gap, which means that in these calculations, we don't see investments for more than 3,000 megawatts of installed capacity of wind and photovoltaics, which will not happen under the governmental scenario. The good news is that the investment opportunity in Czechia will increase at least 6 times compared to the recent figures we've got from the year 2017, which is maybe the main conclusion. The good news is the market of this site cannot be ignored anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Martin, for your slides and presentation. Now, please welcome Johannes Schmidl, who is working for the Austrian Renewable Energy Association to contrast the development in his country to the rest of the region. Johannes, I don't see your slides. Great. Now I see it. Please. Johannes, I don't hear you, and probably also the rest. Oh, now we can hear you. Now I cannot hear you.
No?
Johannes, can you hear me? Can you say something?
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you, and we see your
slides. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now. I was asked by my colleagues to talk about a country where the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, and which is a renewable champion. And I allowed myself to add a question mark to the renewable champion. I think I can skip this one because we are already motivated. We don't know, we don't have to motivate ourselves. Talking about Austria, during the time when the NECP was produced, we had a very special political situation. For the first time in history, we had a purely administrative government, which was directly appointed by the president and which had not an automatic support from the parliament. And this government wanted to purely administer until the new government would have been in charge. And we had elections end of September. And this low ambition of the government is also mirrored in the NECP, which resulted in the fact that the new government, which came into charge in January this year, just a few days after the submission of the Austrian NECP, was in its program much more concrete and ambitious than the NECP itself. So the NECP has to be considered being outdated only a few days after its submission. And this was also mentioned and expressed by the Minister for Climate herself. So if we demand the Austrian NECP should be improved, we are preaching to the already converted. Nevertheless, a few remarks why we consider the NECP being insufficient. It lacks the respective necessary details for the development of renewables. It lacks to meet the CO2 reduction targets from the EU effort sharing regulation. It should be minus 36% until 2030, and we would reach only minus 27%. The Austrian NECP follows a WAM scenario. This is a scenario with additional measures, and this scenario is not sufficient, and we are waiting for a WAM plus scenario. Interestingly, the NECP lists a table of measures, a lot of measures, but these measures are not part of the WAM scenario. So, well, in the forthcoming new NECP, these measures should be included, and they might reach the expected goal in terms of CO2 reduction. I put a question mark, I told you, and this question mark concerns the reduction of CO2 emissions with respect to 1991. We can see hardly any gain. With respect, if we measure on the baseline of 2005, we can see a reduction of minus 11% or 10 million tons of CO2 equivalent. The big problem in Austrian energy remains transport, which increased dramatically since the 1990s, increased its emissions. Much of it is due to transit, but nevertheless, even if the transport only crosses the country, the emissions are accounted for in Austria. A short glimpse about the on the renewable energy landscape and on the energy landscape in total of Austria. We have a rather long tradition in hydropower because of the Danube and of the Alps, and also, especially concerning the small hydropower, we have a tradition of private ownership because it were private operators and farmers, cooperatives, as early as the 1920s who built the first small hydropower plants. We had, as you might know, a referendum in 1978 about a nuclear phase out. It was 50.3% or so for the phase out of nuclear power just before the first already completed nuclear power plant started its operation. So it never started operation and people had to think for alternatives. We had a very interesting solar thermal self-building movement which started in the 1980s, and its house owners and farmers started to build their solar thermal plants by themselves. We have a rather long tradition in using bioenergy because roughly half of the country is covered by forests, and logwood and biomass has been used for a very long time. And we have, which I will mention in some more detail, we have a quite impressive wind energy, especially in the windy east of the country. Yeah, on the right side, you can see the energy demand as of 2018. It's still dominated by fossil fuels, about 2/3 fossil, but about 1/3 of it is renewable. The bulk of it is biomass and hydropower. And if you take a look at the development over time, you could quote a song of Bob Dylan, "There's a slow train coming." It's a rather slowly increase of renewables. We, as the Austrian Renewable Energy Association, collected the potential of the renewables as we see it for Austria, and we come, this is the right of the bars, until more than 1,000 petajoule. On the left side, you see the renewables as of 2018, and in between is, you can imagine, there should be a path of development. The technical potential is enormous. It would, however, not be sufficient to cover the country, the demand of the country by 100%. So we would need some support from energy efficiency. This is deeply needed. And the NECP lacks aspirations in both renewables and energy efficiency. But a new energy efficiency law is forthcoming and should be implemented by next year. And we hope it will support the development of renewables so that they can cover the demand of the country as a whole. Concerning the heat, we as the Renewable Energy Association proposed a heat development of the heat market. It is a step out of oil and gas and a reduction of demand until 2050 in this case, the reduction of demand by half, and then the rest of the demand would be able to be covered by renewables, biomass, district heat, and heat pumps. Bioenergy as an example, this is just to give you an imagination of the importance of bioenergy in Austria. These are the plants of using bioenergy, but also the schools, and you see it's scattered over the whole country. It's a lot of experts and plants and in operation, 2,400 district heating plants, for example, and already 46% of our district heat is renewable. Concerning electricity, we have a rather bold goal to reach 100% renewable electricity by 2030. This is also added in the NECP, and it is called nationally balanced, which means that there will be some remnants of fossil production in industry and to balance the power. Our proposal on the right side, you can see we would add 11,000 megawatts of PV and wind energy and hydropower and so on. To give an example of wind energy, which is quite interesting because I witnessed this myself in the 1990s. The expert of the utilities told Austria is no country for wind energy. And it would have remained this if not persistent pioneers would have built the first plants, and they did, and they gained acceptance by cooperatives who operate and own the plants. And only later on, the utilities stepped in, and it was necessary for the fast expansion that there was a support scheme which was based on the German feed-in tariff model and availability of sufficient zones for wind power. And 60% of the wind power in Austria, which covers 11% of the electricity demand, is still owned by private and cooperative owners, which of course increases the acceptance. There is no NIMBY phenomenon, because if you see the wind energy next to your house and it's your own wind energy, you start to like it. Okay, I would end with my Tetram Tensio, because there are some guys from the Commission listening. Some of the documents still use the oil units, which is illegal, has been illegal for the last 40 years, and it's a framing for fossil fuels, and I think we should stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johannes. I definitely think, agree that we should stop with oil. And now we have quite some questions in the Q&A session. So I see your questions. Thank you for them. I would keep them for the final Q&A session after the presentation of Dirk Hendricks, Secretary General of European Renewable Energies Federation. Dirk, can you please share your screen?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. And can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
Wonderful. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, you see here my presentation. So good morning, everybody, again. Thank you for joining us here with this webinar. And I guess what we have heard here already about the national energy and climate plans was already quite great, and see that there are still a lot of opportunities that we can explore. Now, what you see here is I just would like to use here this opportunity to recall here again the objectives of the NECPs and of the 2030 governance system, and in particular to use this opportunity to reiterate that there are, despite the so-called final NECPs, there are still some upcoming possibilities to amend and improve these national plans for renewable energy, like, for example, following the propositions from the previous speakers. Like, for example, what we have here is you see with the 2030 targets, you know that there will be some plans to reduce the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for 2030, 50 or 55%. Some people are even calling for 65%. So this will be a possibility, and even so this might be a possibility then also for renewables and energy efficiency to kick in. We have, of course, also the ongoing Paris process, and the national and European programs to counter the economic impact of the virus epidemic. So there we see that there are several possibilities to engage. Further all, you can see on the next slide that there are also ongoing dialogues on the NECPs on several levels, and of course according to the governance regulation, we have planned reporting and revision cycles for the next couple of years. So any amendment proposals or improvement proposals, as we just heard, will certainly have a possibility to enter it. One of these instruments that I would like to hear, and you certainly know it all, is a proposal from the European Commission, namely the Next Generation EU. It had been introduced something around 10 days ago, and it encompasses all different kind of measurements to kind of like kickstart the economy again after the COVID epidemic. And here, before I go into the three main areas that are relevant for the energy sector, just to say that after a quick assessment, we have seen that so it is really a major good step in the right direction, that in particular the budget for renewable energy projects is, in our opinion, still not enough. And in particular, what we see is of course, that this budget is mostly in the hands of governments. We will come to that a little bit later. Also we hope that there will be a kind of like more precise ideas on how to coordinate transport renewable energy projects here, because for the moment this is not spelled out in the next generation EU proposal. Now, coming quickly here to the main areas for energy, for the energy sector, what the Commission proposes here is first of all a massive boost from energy production from renewables, as a kind of like a quick win, or to bring in massive amounts in relatively fast. Here, wind offshore is specifically favored. We have another one, which is building renovation, and another one about energy system integration strategy, and here in particular the clean hydrogen strategy as one of its most main components. As mentioned here before, you will see that within this process, the governments are certainly here, will be very important within this process. You have the framework from the European Commission, then the national governments choose the various options, how far they want to go. Of course, the national energy and climate plans will be let's say the basis to roll out the development for renewables. And of course, I also would like to remind you that of course many governments are still in the process to transpose the latest legislation from the European Union into national law. And I mean, also here is still a possibility also to improve the situations for renewable energy projects significantly. So the recommendations here that we have is to all of you is to continue pushing your governments specifically to strongly promote renewable energy and energy efficiency. And I mean, we also see that, for example, at the European Parliament level, that they are also following the NECP process. So here also to our supporters from there to sort of like keep up your efforts to push for a very strong renewable energy development. And something which is always really very good to take into consideration is, of course, that local authorities can be a very good ally in this. If we see, like for example, in Belgium with the city of Ghent that have sort of like used their let's say the national framework to promote really a maximum of renewable energies here, or that we see that, for example, cities can be much more progressive than national governments, like for example, here the new initiatives, for example, in Bratislava or Prague or Budapest, that this might be a possibility to go ahead. When it comes to the recommendations to really quickly build huge amount of renewable energy, here you see all these list of recommendations that I have lined out here. I guess given the task that we have to decarbonize our energy system, here it is, I guess, necessary to say that for these large tasks that we need all forms of renewable energy, and no matter of small and large or large and small, we need them all, as we always say here. We could see that there was a lot of progress in the electricity sector over the last 20 years, but I mean, here heating and cooling as well as transport is still quite neglected, despite always the sayings that specifically the heating and cooling sector provides quite a lot of low-hanging fruits. The other thing is, as mentioned here already before, renewable energy communities and cooperatives, energy citizens can play really quite a huge role in this, kind of like a bottom-up approach to roll out renewable energy throughout the country. And here, of course, these decentralized renewable energy can play there quite a very good role. When it comes to renewable energy communities and cooperatives, we came up with quite a long list of specific recommendations for them. Here, I would like now only to highlight one, and that is here a designated finance facility and a secretariat to help them to get sort of like that. There are many more that will be established in the next coming years. An abolishment of administrative barriers is something else here specifically that we still face in many countries, very long permitting processes. And of course, this is not really very helpful with this. If we're going to look at the impact of the COVID epidemic here on the renewable energy sector throughout Europe, we have seen that there is due to the, let's say, dependency on equipment from outside the EU, that this have stalled several renewable energy projects and created some problems. So here, also together with the industrial strategy from the European Union, it might be a good idea to create a kind of like more European strategic value chain for this. And again, this would also help very much to create local jobs, local wealth, and would also connect very nicely with other ongoing EU projects, like for example, the skills agenda here. So there could be quite a lot of synergies to be done. Training and capacity programs we have already mentioned or had been already mentioned before. Just simply there will be a lot of new jobs with these kind of like massive rollout here. I guess one of the most important things, and this is also what we have seen from our assessment from the National Energy and Climate Plans, is that it needs to be absolutely clear that no further subsidies or tax breaks are given to any form of conventional energy. This also includes explicitly nuclear energy, of course. And one word of warning, and I'm going to repeat this also afterwards, is we have seen here in the NECPs and also here as we are monitoring here what governments are currently doing, that gas is very often used to substitute coal. And yes, it might be that you save some CO2 in the short term, but I mean, there is a really very high danger to that. First of all, CO2 production is then locked in for quite a number of decades to come, that you have the stranded assets. And I don't want to go into this discussion now, but I mean, we really should ask ourselves the question if the enhancement in gas infrastructure that is very often requested is really necessary, or if this is not really unnecessary investments. Here, when it comes to the decarbonization of the European building stock, again, here with gas, I just would like to point out to a very good study of the German Renewable Energy Association that basically shows that it is economically much more, sort of like that it is economically much better to when, for example, oil or old gas heatings are exchanged to immediately go into various solution from renewable energy instead of going into the latest gas boilers. And I mean, another thing that I would like to highlight here is in particular that the public building sector can lead by example to make this very attractive also to private citizens. Here with finally the recommendations for the energy system integration strategy, here our recommendation is just that this should be actively coordinated here between all different kind of levels. And when it comes to hydrogen, that only green hydrogen should be promoted and supported. Here, Dieter Juul Jorgensen said recently in a seminar that the Commission would go for blue hydrogen in order to kickstart the market. And I guess that this is not a really very good idea, but to go immediately for green hydrogen as only solution. In this respect, I thank you really very much. Let's use these opportunities to decarbonize our energy system together, to involve citizens, to create local wealth. And I encourage everyone to keep pushing for this cause. And as also the previous speakers and moderator mentioned before, we are there to help and to provide you with all the necessary information you need this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dirk, for your presentation. And now we no longer need to rush, and we can take time to answer the questions in the Q&A session. I will start with one which is related to the Hungarian situation. Bella, are you still there?
Sure.
So if we can spend a little time answering the question by Martin Madej. What are the plans of the government to regulate the solar with nuclear energy?
I must admit that I don't have a clue. I think they don't really have a plan for this, just because it is completely bad idea to create such a huge solar capacity without the thinking of the energy mix optimization. That is my opinion.
Yeah, sometimes the answers are simple. Maybe they don't have a clue. We have another question by Klára Sutlovičová, which is to all the panelists. What are the three main areas for strategic intervention to scale up renewables deployment in Visegrad countries in the context of adopted climate neutrality target? Who wants to start?
I may shortly have a note on this, probably.
Yes, please.
Czech Energy Chamber. I might have 2 points, and would be very curious to hear other opinions. But my 2 points are: first one is the ambition. That's definitely something what we saw already in Martin Bursik's keynote, mentioning how low the overall ambition of Visegrad countries is. We see the European effort going up to for at least 32%, and we see Visegrad countries having target of around 1/3 lower than the common European target. So the ambition is the first thing. And the second, our conclusion is that the biggest gap the Visegrad countries have in that called modern renewables, which means electricity, which means wind and photovoltaics. And I think from all the presentation was pretty clear that this is the second thing all the Visegrad countries are very weak in. And as I said, we'll be very happy to hear other opinions, suggestions for next points.
Okay, Jan, if I may add something. So Irena Gajewska from the Polish Wind Energy Association. So I would agree that definitely agree with Dirk's presentation that the offshore wind development. And there has been a study by European Commission under BMIP, and it says that the cooperation between countries, actually the development of cross-border projects would add a lot to the RES deployment among countries in European Union. And also, when we were talking about Visegrad countries, well, it's difficult for countries that don't have the seashore. However, quite recently there were European Commission consultations on the renewable energy financing scheme, so such pan-European support scheme for renewable development in support of the NECPs. And one of the goals is actually to enhance the cooperation between countries within Europe. So it's like member countries, so also neighboring countries. And when I was preparing the PPL statement to this consultations, and also looking through what Wind Europe was proposing, there is one, let's say, postulate that actually this scheme would offer the possibility for sea-locked, meaning that for the countries that don't have access to sea, to actually cooperate under this scheme with the countries that do. So it would somehow open the way to the countries without offshore wind potential to take advantage of the development of this technology for to actually achieve their commitments. And so offshore wind definitely. Also the development of CPPA market. So I was putting this as the opportunity in my presentation. What I should have said is that actually the Polish NECP doesn't even mention this form of energy contracting, and we know that the European Commission guidelines are that such measures for PPA market development should be included in the NECP. And so far as I'm informed, neither of the Visegrad countries has it in their NECPs. So there is definitely a great potential for the decarbonization in this industrial part. So this needs to be, let's say, improved. So the measures have to be put in the NECPs so that actually the CPPAs are let's say the deals are done on a much bigger scale. So this of course needs a regulatory framework. And one last thing, what I would add to this is, that for countries such as Poland with huge dependence on coal, and one of the biggest, let's say, still coal dependent regions in Poland, the Just Transition Fund and the funding from this pool for the just energy transition is important, because we cannot forget that there are still thousands of people employed in fossil fuels, in mining, and the opportunities have to be developed to actually help them go through this transition. It's not only the just transition for the energy, it's for their lives, for the, let's say, economic situation of the whole region. Thank you.
Thank you, Irena. We have a new question.
If I may add one more thing shortly.
Yes, please.
Béla Munkácsi from Hungary, from Energiaklub. So I think it would be very important to find the synergies between the branches of the different environmental management areas. For example, the organic waste management and the electricity production, or between the building science and the heating and cooling sector, or the city planning or work organization like the home office, and the local transportation energy consumption reduction. So there are a lot of synergies, a lot of possibilities to reduce or to optimize our energy consumption.
Thank you, Bella.
This is Jan from SAPI, and I will just quickly add my point of view regarding this question, and I will approach it from a very different way. I think the government should really take into consideration what we propose and what the associations like us and like the national associations in other countries really have to say, because what we already have a lot of the solutions, we already have a lot of the calculations, we already have a lot of experience from the broad, but the problem is that the government doesn't listen to us or doesn't consult us enough. So that's one thing that is quite strategic to do and to start really doing on a systematic base.
Thank you, Jan. Do we have a volunteer to answer a question by Rachel Hajar regarding the calculations of feed-in tariffs and auctions, which you can see in the Q&A?
Well, I can add something. So
thanks for this, Irena.
Our support scheme with this system actually is notified till the end of June of next year. And when we were appealing to the government to prolong it, we were actually saying that this is the right mechanism, that it is actually pretty, the rules are known and they work well, and it actually is the best form so far, much better than the previous with the green certificates. So as I see the opinions among the industry in Poland, and also again I will let's say come back to this consultation on the renewable energy scheme. It is clearly from the point of view of the renewable energy associations, at least I mean wind, the best let's say option for support schemes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you very much, Irena. Thanks to all the panelists. After the webinar ends, I will again share the summary paper we prepared, which summarizes our analysis of the national energy and climate plans in Visegrad countries and Austria. I will also include the press release we prepared, where you can find contact details of our panelists. And if you want, you can approach them and discuss details. Many thanks to the European Commission for the support of the Renewables Networking project, and to Dirk Hendricks of European Renewable Energies Federation for cooperating with us on these activities. It's very much appreciated and also needed to increase the share of renewables in our region. And I hope that these so-called final national energy and climate plans are not final, and we can still increase the ambition. So once again, thank you for your presentations and for your participations. and have a nice rest of the day, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much to everyone. Thanks, and we talk soon.
And thank you for the
Thank
good
you for-
questions. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye.